From claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt.
EWTN Radio presents The Miracle Hunter with Michael O'Neill.
Welcome to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. Happy Lent, everyone, or I hope your Lent is off to a good start, I should say, maybe more appropriately, as we reflect on this time heading into Easter, and we all try to use this opportunity, whether it's giving up sweets or otherwise, to get ourselves in the right place. Ahead for you today, we'll have some various Lenten topics coming up on this program, but for today's show, we'll be still focused on a couple of things that we like to talk about. Marian Apparitions is one. People know me from my work on miraclehunter.com, where I've got cataloged as many as 2,500 Marian apparitions throughout history, and one of my all-time favorite books, and I feel like I own every book in English, at least in modern times, written about Marian apparitions. And one of my all-time favorites is a book from Our Sunday Visitor. It's a classic book by Catherine Odell. It's called Those Who Saw Her. And news came out that just released is the 4th edition of this book. So congrats to Catherine Odell on that accomplishment. We'll be excited to talk to her later in the show. We've talked to her over the years about this incredible book that details some of the great visionaries and visions throughout Catholic history. Later in the program, we'll be talking about Venerable Nelson Baker. He was one of the episodes of They Might Be Saints. He's someone on the path to sainthood who lived an incredible life, and we'll be talking to some members of his canonization cause later in the program to talk about updates, find out when he might be moving along to blessed and then to saint. And later in the show, I will be talking about They Might Be Saints, which is a segment on the show. We do a Might Be Saint of the Day and Sainthood News, etc. But for people who want to check out the program, They Might Be Saints on EWTN, this week we'll be featuring an episode on Montse Grasses. So I examined the saintly life of Montse Grasses. She was a cheerful 17-year-old who faced cancer with extraordinary faith and joy, and she could be the first woman of Opus Dei to be declared a saint, and so that'll be coming up next Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. They Might Be Saints. You can also pick up the book, They Might Be Saints, which is available at EWTNRC.com. And check out Explore with the Miracle Hunter. One of the more interesting episodes, I think, is when we go to Tre Fontana in Italy. I investigate a miraculous encounter at the site where St. Paul was martyred, the Virgin of Revelation's appearance to Bruno Carnacchiola, a rabid anti-Catholic, changed both the man and the church itself. So check that one out, Explore with the Miracle Hunter. That's every Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and this Saturday we'll be exploring Tre Fontana. Later in the show, we're going to be looking at the 365 Days with Mary project. For today, we've got Our Lady of Exile from Florianopolis in Brazil in the year 1673. And the Might Be Saint of the Day is Blessed Elisabetta Sana from Italy, who lived from the year 1788 to 1857. And the question of the week. In 2016, Pope Francis said to a crowd that Mother Angelica is in heaven. Can this be considered an act of equivalent canonization? I'll do my best to answer that one later in the show. And the Miracle of the Day. This is a new segment we're doing for 2024. For today's date, February 17th, we'll be reflecting on the apparition that occurred in San Nicolas, Argentina in the year 1989. The miracle news for today isn't quite a miracle at all, but it's pretty impressive. It relates to a Guinness Book of World Records accomplishment related to the Virgin Mary. So the story goes that in the year 2023, there was this mantle of flowers that weighed an estimated 8,800 pounds and covered an area of 800 square meters. And in the mantle of 2024 will be even larger. And we're talking, of course, about the mantle of the Virgin Mary. And this is in Valencia. So this Artisan Guild of Florists of the Valencian community has set its sight on a new Guinness Book of World Records with an offering to the Virgin de los Desamparados, which is traditionally made after the Fallas Festival in Valencia. And it, as read in Valencia Plaza, the president of the guild, Juan Uresma, he believed that the mantle is already the largest in the world and doubts that it can be surpassed. And he has already contacted the Council of Valencia and the Justa Central Falera for support in his quest to have this cape or mantle officially recognized by the Guinness World Records. And the cape is made from carnations of the bouquets carried by the participants in the offering to the Virgin. In 2023, the mantle weighed 4,000 kilograms and covered this huge area. And according to Uresma, the 2024 mantle will be even larger. And the quote is, "We deserve it because there is no floral mantle like it in the world," Uresma said in a statement to the European press. And the floral mantle of the Virgin of the Forsaken, the Virgin de los Desamparados, is a symbol of our city and our culture, and we want to share it with the world. And so, if the mantle is officially recognized by the Guinness World Records, it will be the latest in a series of successful attempts by Valencian forests to achieve international recognition. So, pretty amazing accomplishment to see if they get the Guinness World Record for this largest display of flowers. Let's take a look at Catholic Pub Trivia. We do this every week where we ask a trivia question and give out a prize to an emailer that writes in with the correct answer. Last week, we asked a question about Our Lady of Lourdes, and we asked how many decades were on the rosary held by the Virgin Mary in the apparitions at Lourdes, and the answer was 6. And writing in, it was the winner, Ian Edwards, writing in with that answer. And I think there's been the idea that the 6th decade is for the holy souls in purgatory, but somewhat of a different rosary than we normally pray. So thanks so much, Ian, for writing in, and you are the winner of the prize, the Faces of Mary. And the question for this week, we're talking today on today's program about Venerable Nelson Baker, an absolutely incredible American on the path to sainthood. With one miracle, he'll be a blessed. A second miracle, he'll be a saint. And he lived an incredible life, including one where he built a basilica in old age. And he died at the age of 94. And so the question is, who was the oldest American saint at the time of their death? Question again, who was the oldest American saint at the time of their death? If you think you know that question, want to win the prize, the image of the Faces of Mary, send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and we'll see who has the right answer in the fastest, shortest time. And send me an email, and we'll see. The winners will be posted on the show page on miraclehunter.com. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking with author Kersten Odell about the new release of her book, Those Who Saw Her, Apparitions of Mary. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. People know me from my website, miraclehunter.com, and on my website, I got started at least cataloging Marian apparitions. And on there, you'll find as many as 2,500 claims of apparitions and much fewer that have been approved by the Church. And I've studied this over the years, and I own every book that's ever been written in English, at least in the last several decades, related to Marian apparitions. And one of my all-time favorite books that I've got is called Those Who Saw Her, Apparitions of Mary, and that's written by author Kersten Odell with Our Sunday Visitor. And this is what I consider to be one of the classic books on Marian apparitions. And the last time an edition came out was 2010. And now for 2024, we have a brand new edition, the 4th edition of this book. It's been expanded and revised. So I'm excited to welcome Kersten Odell back to the show. Welcome to the show today, Kersten.
Well, thank you so much for the welcome. I appreciate being here and appreciate the opportunity to talk about the newest edition of the book.
Well, it's great to talk with you again. I know we've talked over the years about your book and about Marian apparitions, and you've got a new edition of the book. It's expanded and revised, and the main concept behind the book is you present some of the very highly approved and church-recognized visions of Mary throughout Christian history. And, of course, people are familiar with some of these big names, Fatima, Lourdes, and Guadalupe, but you also present some of the ones that people may not have heard of quite as well. And one of the things in this book, we have an edition of Our Lady of Good Help, which are those 1859 apparitions approved by Bishop David L. Ricken in the Diocese of Green Bay on December 8th, 2010. So this is a very modern Marian apparition approval. This went back some centuries, but of course this is a big deal that it happened here in the United States. Talk a little bit about some of the updates to the book and especially Our Lady of Good Help.
Okay, well, let me start first of all with the cover, which I was particularly pleased with and thought really captured one of the main points of the book, which is that Mary, in her appearances and her visits, has come to really children all around the world. It's not accurate to assume that Marian apparitions have been all European. In fact, Mary has come to Asia, to South America, to Africa, as well as now to North America at the apparitions that you referred to at Champion, Wisconsin. So when the cover of the book was just sent to me as, to the author to let me see what they had in mind, I was just very delighted because it now has, and your listeners and people looking for the book will discover that it has 6 images of different apparitions of Mary around the world, including Guadalupe, including Kibeho in Africa, and including Akita in Japan, and of course several European apparitions too. But the fact that it explored this and placed this right on the cover, I think was a very important message of the book, which is that Mary has no favorites, and Mary has come and wants to reach out to all of her children around the world in every ethnic group, in every nation, every culture. So that was an important thing, I thought, that was really great about this edition of the book.
Absolutely. And when we compare these various visions of Mary, the name of the book is Those Who Saw Her. We're talking about the visionaries, perhaps, in these places around the world. You might be referring to Akita in Japan with Sister Agnes Sasagawa, or
right.
in Kibeho, Rwanda, the school children there who saw her. They're in Africa, or in the United States, we have the visionary from Belgium, but who lived in the United States, Odell Bryce, and then, of course, St. Juan Diego in Mexico, and Catherine Labouré, and Bernadette Subaru, and the Children of Fatima.
Yeah.
Do you see similarities, or are there points of correspondence between when you look at those who saw her, the people who saw Mary?
Well, I think one of the things that people notice and they might initially wonder about and question is, how is it or why did Mary often choose children, or not always children, but sometimes simple or less educated people to receive these apparitions, to receive these messages that she wanted to share with the wider community and the wider group of believers at that particular time and at that place? And that is a good question because in some cases, for instance, at Fatima, those children were 7 and 9 and 10 years old. Very little children, very young children. So, in a sense, why share these messages, these important messages with children who are so young and so inexperienced? And in some cases, in other apparitions, it was adults, but people that wouldn't have had a lot of clout or a lot of, traction maybe in that particular society or culture. But I think the reason for this is that children couldn't be accused of having anything to gain by sharing these messages that they say and they tell people that they've received from Our Lady, from the Mother of God. And so they would have no way of gaining power or influence or wealth by claiming to see these visions. So I suspect that's one of the reasons why, these visions have often been shared with people who have no power, no vested interest, etc. But, yeah, there is a lot of variety beyond that, really, in the kinds of people, kinds of ages. Some of them actually, as I said, as I've mentioned, have been adults. But it's Mary chooses. And Mary choosing people who can share her message, I think, in a very honest, straightforward way.
Absolutely. We're talking today with Catherine Odell, author of Those Who Saw Her, Apparitions of Mary, Revised and Expanded, the 4th edition now from our Sunday Visitor. And when we're comparing visionaries from around the world, but what about if we compare the way that people saw Mary around the world? Of course, we're talking about some sort of diversity in these apparitions of North America with Our Lady of Champion, as she's known now, or in South America, various places all over Europe, in Kibeho in Rwanda, or Akita in Japan, or anywhere around the world. Mary comes to the people in the way that they can best be received. What do you make of the different appearances of Mary, since Mary was an actual person living on earth, Mary of Nazareth? What do we make of her looking and speaking differently in different places?
Well, right. She appears in a way that people are comfortable with her and can hear her message and can see her message in a sense, because as you mentioned, at Guadalupe, of course, back in 1531, she appears as a native maiden. And Juan Diego, the visionary, the only visionary of that apparition, immediately recognizes her as a beautiful young maiden who speaks to him in his native language, Nahuatl. And so, but in other settings and in other centuries and in nations, she appears so that particular visionary is comfortable with her and can communicate with her. So in the Rue de Bac apparition in the 18th century, Catherine Laboure, this is in France, of course, in Paris, near Paris, sees this Virgin appearing in the chapel, in her convent chapel. And this is one of my actually favorite apparitions, really, the story of it anyway. Catherine had lost her own mother at the age of 9 or 10. It was devastated. She was the youngest of about 8 or 9 children, the second youngest. And she was devastated by the loss of her mother at that age. And about a month after her mother died, she was discovered by a servant in the house on the top of a dresser that had been in her parents' bedroom, looking at a large statue of Mary, saying, "Well, now you will have to be my mother." And so that loss of her mother really spoke to her throughout her whole life. So this apparition was particularly dear in a very personal way, too. And when she saw the Virgin appearing in this chapel in the middle of the night, she went up to her, and the Virgin sat down in the bishop's chair. And according to the reports, Catherine knelt down beside the Our Lady and put her hands on Our Lady's knees. And she said later, "This was the happiest moment of my life." So she had her mother back in a certain sense. But those apparitions were also characterized by Our Lady's appeal to Catherine to have a medal struck, which she wanted to use to catechize. And the medal was to have the message, "O Mary, conceived without sin, pray for us who have recourse to thee." So, over a period of years, Catherine was able to promote the production of this medal. It was eventually called a miraculous medal because it was connected with so many healings and cures at that particular time, and I'm sure throughout its history. So that was another way of appearing, in a sense, was through a medal. In two different apparitions in the 19th century, at Pontmain in 1871 and in Knock in Ireland in 1879, there were wordless apparitions.
I'm glad you brought that up. That was going to be my next question. There's, sometimes Mary speaks loquaciously for many hours, perhaps at Kibeho, and then at other times at Knock and other places, Pontmain, or we talk about in Egypt those Coptic apparitions, Zaytun, where she appears without saying anything. What do we make of the different delivery of messages of Mary at different places?
Well, those, as you point out, they're wordless, and it was very interesting because the historical background for Pontmain was that France, this was in France, was very close to the war front with the Prussian army, and Prussian army was very close to attacking this particular part of the country. And the people knew that, and they had sent some of their sons and some of the young men from their village to fight against the Prussians. And so it was a very imminent sort of thing. So, I mean, there was underlying terror and fear that they would be attacked, that they would lose the war, that Prussia would defeat France. So this particular wordless apparition, which ended up having a message shared, but literally with a banner unfurling under the apparition, under the vision of Mary, which said, God will hear you in a little while, which isn't terribly specific, but what it meant to the hearts of the people who were terrified of war and destruction facing them imminently was that, okay, we'll be protected. And then the second part of the message was, my son allows himself to be touched. It was an unspoken message, but it gave them comfort, and they immediately recognized and were encouraged by that. And in fact, the Prussian army, for some reason, began to reverse itself and to head away from this village and out of France. But at Knock, in the same way, there was a wordless apparition of Mary, St. Joseph, and St. John the Evangelist, which apparently just about everybody in the village saw. So, in a sense, all those people were also visionaries. But there was no particular spoken or even in this case written message. But it was a comfort for them because our Irish people had suffered so much in that century because of the potato famine and having so many of their family members, their friends, because of the incredible poverty, immigrate to like the United States, to this country. And also so many people dying of starvation and malnutrition there. So it was a heartbreak time for that particular country. And this particular apparition, wordless apparition, gave them comfort. Well, that's a message, but it's not a spoken message.
We're talking today with Catherine Odell about the update to her book, Those Who Saw Her, from our Sunday Visitor. And when we look at Marian apparitions throughout history, and they're so well presented in your book, Those Who Saw Her, people will get to know these very famous occasions of church-recognized Marian apparitions throughout history. And if you had to sort of step back and try to, I get this question a lot, and I'd love to hear what you think about it. Why does Mary come? What's the why of Marian apparitions? We all find them to be these spectacular moments. They're inspirational. I think people really get excited to hear that the Mother of God has walked amongst us at these rare moments throughout history, or at least the ones that have been recognized by the Catholic Church. What is the reason that Mary comes to us?
Well, that's a very good question, and I think that there's several kinds of ways to answer that. But I think, as we've just discussed, in those apparitions at Knock and in France in the late 19th century, those were messages of consolation and support and protection for people that were really suffering. People of faith, but people who had just really suffered from a lot of different heartaches, starvation in the case of Irish, and the emigration, the loss of their family members. But other apparition themes seem to be, over many, many centuries, an appeal, a reminder for the need for repentance, for intercessory prayer, for sacrifice, for return to the sacraments, particularly to the Eucharist and to reconciliation, to increased recitation and devotion to the Rosary, and the building of shrines and churches to help people remember this. In a certain way, you could say that it's a bit like in our culture today, we have our billboards along our roads and highways. They seem to be bigger and fancier than they ever were before, and they are messages to remind people about something they probably already know about, but yeah, it you can't avoid seeing it, and it reminds you of something. I think of apparitions in a certain sense as reminders. And people, in life, they do need reminders. And so many of the apparitions have been dramatic and beautiful, and the healings, and especially places like Lourdes and also in Latin America. The healings and the ability and the connection with a lot of healings and miraculous cures with those particular apparitions have also kind of drawn attention to the message, and they've been unavoidable kind of billboards for the message that Mary is trying to share with us, which is we need to return and pay more attention to the most important things in life: prayer, devotion, and worship.
Absolutely. Well, we've been so grateful today to be joined by Kersten Odell, author of Those Who Saw Her, a classic book about Marian apparitions, now out in its 4th edition for our Sunday visitor. Congratulations on that, Kersten, for the 4th edition. And for people who want to pick up that book or find out more about you and your work, what's the best place that people can go?
Well, as you mentioned, Michael, the book is available through the publisher, Our Study Visitor.
Wonderful. Well, we're so grateful to you, Kersten Odell, author of Those Who Saw Her, Apparitions of Mary, for joining us on today's program.
Thank you, Michael.
God bless. That was Kersten Odell, author of Those Who Saw Her. Fascinating conversation about Marian apparitions with a true expert. And as we mentioned, the revised and expanded edition of her book, the 4th edition from Our Sunday Visitor, is out. Those Who Saw Her. Check that one out. It's one of my all-time favorites. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be answering the question of the week. In 2016, did Pope Francis say to a crowd that Mother Angelica is in heaven? Is that a form of canonization? Stay with us for that answer.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. We love getting your questions on this show. People write in with questions from around the world about miracles happening in today's world and those that have happened centuries ago. And I love giving talks around the country. Every year I speak to Catholic parishes, to Catholic events, different shrines. And I always give a talk. It's about 45 minutes. And at the end of the talk, I open it up to questions. And I love to see what people are thinking about. People have lots of questions about miracles. And if you want to invite me to speak at your parish or group, you can send me an email through my website. Click on the Contact tab on miraclehunter.com. I've been speaking a lot these days about Eucharistic miracles because of the Eucharistic revival that's been going on in our Catholic Church in this year. So you can get a hold of me that way. But I love getting these questions that are emailed to me as well, and I got a really good one this past week, kind of an interesting one for EWTN viewers and listeners. The question was, Dear Miracle Hunter, in 2016, Pope Francis said to a crowd that Mother Angelica, quote, is in heaven. Can this be an act of equipollent canonization? Thank you, Devin. Thanks, Devin, for your question. And you might wonder what equipollent canonization is. And it turns out that the Pope, being the Pope, has the ability to go ahead and canonize somebody even when they don't have all their miracles in place. So famous example, St. Peter Faber is one. St. Margaret of Castello was one from this past year who was elevated due to equipollent or equivalent canonization. And we also have cases like in the United States, Blessed Junipero Serra. When the Pope visited the United States, there weren't 2 miracles that had been recognized, there were only 1, but the Pope anyway made him Saint Junipero Serra. So he's the Pope, he can do whatever he wants. And so in this case, we have a question of when he was speaking off the cuff, as sometimes he tends to do, he said to a crowd that Mother Angelica is in heaven. So can we consider this a case of where the Pope is elevating somebody to sainthood? No, this is just a comment from the Pope. Of course, when they go forward with canonization causes, it has to run through the dicastery for the causes of saints, and all the research has to be done, and a formal decree must be promulgated in conjunction with that dicastery from the Pope. So no, just an off-the-cuff statement from the Pope doesn't make Mother Angelica a saint. Everyone here at EWTN believes that she is a saint, of course, but she hasn't yet formally been recognized by the Church, and her canonization cause is open, I believe. but she hasn't yet moved along the path. So something to pray for, Mother Angelica's canonization. But Pope Francis will need to do it in a more formal way if, in fact, they want to do an equipolant or equivalent canonization. So thanks, Devin, for your question. And if you have a question for the Miracle Hunter, you can send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe I'll be answering your question on the air next week. Let's take a look at the 365 Days with Mary project. We do this every week where we look at the Marian devotion of the day. We all know Fatima, May 13th, or Lourdes, February 11th, or Guadalupe, December 12th. But believe it or not, there's a different Marian devotion from somewhere around the world that lines up exactly to the day's date. And we're talking about feast days or days of miracles or basilicas being built and dedicated on a certain day. There's a different way that Mary's honored on every day of the calendar year somewhere around the world. And so for today's day, we've got Our Lady of Exile from Florianópolis in Brazil in the year 1673. And the story goes that explorer Francisco Dias Velo of Sao Paulo founded the town of Nossa Senhora do Desterro on Santa Catarina Island in southern Brazil in February 17, 1673, according to local accounts. And amongst the occupants of the area were his family, 2 Jesuits, and a few other Brazilians, and hundreds of Indian workers. Florianópolis, the present-day city, grew from the founding settlement. Its chapel transformed into the cathedral named for the city's patron, Our Lady of Exile. And on this date, she is still venerated annually there. And a sculpture in the cathedral depicting the Holy Family on their way to Egypt was carved of lindenwood by the Demetz workshop in the Italian Tyrol. And the statue was blessed on May 30th, 1902. And that is Our Lady of Exile from Florianópolis in Brazil in 1673. For more information on this fascinating devotion, or under any of the hundreds of other Marian devotions throughout the world, you can go to 365dayswithmary.com. You can pick up the book. You can download the free app on the Apple App Store, or you can join the Facebook page and any of the other 10,000 followers of 365 Days with Mary. Let's take a look at our new segment, Miracle of the Day. This is something we've started in 2024, where we look at a miracle that happened somewhere in the world that lines up exactly to the day's date. And so for today's date, February 17th, we've got a miracle from February 17th in 1989. And this connects with Our Lady of the Rosary in San Nicolas, Argentina. And the story is on September 25th, 1983, Gladys Mota de Quiroga had a vision of the Virgin Mary when she was praying the rosary at her home in San Nicolas, which is 2 hours north of Buenos Aires. I was just there myself last year, and it was the beginning of a long series of apparitions that were claimed by this devout housewife, which included over 1,800 messages, and a sanctuary, which is still under construction. It's a very basic one, to my eye anyway, was built in response to the devotional revival and international interest there, and many miracles, including the cure of a boy's brain tumor, were recorded. In 1983, the seer and her confessor discovered a statue in the cathedral storage matching the Virgin's appearance, and it received a papal blessing. It was sent to the sanctuary and built at the Virgin's request on the banks of Paraná, which became a pilgrimage destination renowned for miracles. And the connection to today, February 17th, is that one of those many messages occurred on that day, February 17th, 1989, and the quote from that message was, "Now the world must know that the Mother of Christ will overcome Satan, because by her side will be her sons, humble ones." And so that was the quote from today, February 17th, in the year 1989, and that's today's Miracle of the Day. Let's take a look at They Might Be Saints. We talk about this every week, miracles happening all around the world, and those things relate to sainthood causes. And we have Pope Francis canonizing Argentina's first female saint, Mama Antula, and Pope Francis canonized Argentina's first female saint, Maria Antonia of St. Joseph, affectionately known as the Pope's, in the Pope's country as Mama Antula, in a Mass at St. Peter's on Sunday. And Argentina's president, Javier Milei, he sat in the front row to the Pope's right during this canonization on February 11th and embraced the Pope at the end of the Mass. And for people who want to know, Mama Antula, who lived from 1730 to 1799, was a consecrated laywoman who promoted Ignatian spirituality and founded the Buenos Aires House for Spiritual Exercises at the time of widespread hostility to the Jesuit order. And the Pope praised this saint as a model of apostolic fervor and boldness for traveling thousands of miles on foot through deserts and dangerous roads to bring people to God. And so that is the new saint of Argentina, the first female saint there, Saint Mama Antula. And the might-be saint of the day for today is Blessed Elisabetta Sana, who lived from 1788 to 1857 in Italy. She was born on April 23, 1788 in Codronangos in Sassari in Italy. She was a married laywoman in the Diocese of Rome and Sassari in Italy, and she was a widow. And she was a member of the Secular Franciscan Order and of the Union of the Catholic Apostolate. She died on February 17, 1857 in Rome of natural causes, declared venerable in 2014 by Pope Francis by a decree of heroic virtues, and also beatified by Pope Francis 2 years later on September 17th. And her beatification was celebrated at the Basilica of Santissima Trinità de Circassia in Italy, presided by Cardinal Angelo Amato. With one more miracle, Blessed Elisabetta Sana will be declared a saint. And for those people who want to watch They Might Be Saints, check out Montse Grasses this Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. I'll be examining the saintly life of Montse Grasses, the cheerful 17-year-old who faced cancer with extraordinary faith and joy. She could be the first woman of Opus Dei to be declared a saint. Check that one out and theymightbesaints.com for more information. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking with Monsignor David LiPuma about Venerable Nelson Baker, who is on the path to sainthood from Buffalo. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. People who tune into this show know that I love talking about saints, and maybe more specifically future saints, and maybe even more specifically future American saints. And I do this program called They Might Be Saints on EWTN, and there's a book by the same name, and there's a chapter and an episode dedicated to Venerable Nelson Baker. And he is one of the more incredible, there are all these people on the path to sainthood, these people who will be saints today. They're all amazing people, of course, by virtue of where they are and how they live their lives and are in heaven with God. But Venerable Nelson Baker lived a life that is worth noting, to be sure, an absolutely incredible one. And we're so excited to be following up and talking again to Father David LiPuma, the OLV National Shrine and Basilica Rector. And we'll also be joined by David Kersten, the Chief Executive Officer of OLV Charities. Welcome to the program today, Father David and David Kersten.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having us on. We're honored.
Yeah, it's great to talk with you again, and I still think back to the filming of the episode that we did there in Buffalo at that OLV National Shrine and Basilica. One of my all-time favorite episodes that we did, and the life of Father Baker and his legacy is impressive. It's something that many of the saints who are being considered, or the people who will be saints someday, perhaps they didn't have these lives of accomplishment or renown. But Father Baker has a very different legacy. Talk to us a little bit about who was the man and how his legacy lives on today.
Certainly. Well, with this Friday, we'll be celebrating his birthday. He was born February 16th, 1842, downtown Buffalo. He was raised first by his German Lutheran father, but at the age of 9, he asked to be converted to become a Catholic and join his Irish Catholic mother. And obviously she was very pleased that at a young age he sought that out. He would go on, though, to eventually be ordained in March 19th of 1876. And he would serve as a priest for 60 years before he passed away on July 29th, 1936. And almost all of that priestly ministry was done here, which was originally called Limestone Hill, where there was a small church, St. Patrick. There was a small protectory and a small orphanage. But when Father Baker would eventually take over the institutions and the parish, out of that would grow what would eventually become Our Lady of Victory National Shrine and Basilica, and then a series of outreach and ministry to orphans, to unwed mothers, to troubled boys who needed direction in their lives, to a working home for boys, a working home for girls, a protectory where they were safe, where they learned all kinds of trades and would go on to be very effective people in society. And all because Father Baker believed in the goodness of every person, and that every person had the ability to change for the better once they were given the opportunity. So,
from what I can tell, it seems that at some point, Father Nelson Baker was perhaps the most famous and influential person in all of Buffalo. Would you agree with that?
He was named the most influential person of the 20th century, and that was quite an honor. They call them, when we refer to Lackawanna now, they refer to it as the City of Charity and the home of Father Baker. So there's actually signage all over the place because his legacy did not die in 1936, but is going strong to this very day, where we are taking care of over 12,000 children, family, and youth every day here in this City of Charity, doing exactly what Father Baker did, meeting the signs of the times, meeting the challenges of the times, and really doing our very best to help change lives for the better. Father Baker did all of this because of a pilgrimage that he took back in 1874 as a seminarian, which we are going to reenact on April 30th of this year through May 9th. We're going to travel to Paris, France, where he did, along with the pilgrimage. We're going to stop there and visit Notre Dame de Victoire, Our Lady of Victory, the church that inspired him to dedicate his life to the patronage of Our Lady of Victory, and then to go on to Lourdes and to Rome, where he experienced the splendor of the Church Universal and the beauty of the magnificent St. Peter's Basilica. And that really is what formed him in his priesthood, because he said someday, after all that he had done in terms of taking care of children and families and youth and all the work that he did, back in 1921, he finally was able to make that reality by building this shrine, this basilica, when he laid the cornerstone in 1921 and celebrated the first Mass of Christmas in 1925, and then it was consecrated in May of 1926. And that's really this opportunity for us now. We appreciate you giving us more attention to Father Baker, because we really want people to know today, shine a light on the dome, shine a light on his life and his legacy, and all that continues to this very day. When he was buried in 1936, they already believed he was a saint then. They took his bodily fluids and put them in a separate sarcophagus. And when he was brought out of the cemetery in 1999 at the encouragement of the cause of the saints, they said, bring him closer to the people so they have access to the tomb. So we brought his remains, his body, into the basilica. He's entombed here by the shrine of Our Lady of Lourdes, so that every day people can come in and pray for intercession through Father Baker. As you know, he's at the second stage of the canonization process. He was named Servant of God in 1987, and then Pope Benedict XVI named him the Venerable in 2011. And now we are hoping and praying, and this is what we need. We need 2 intercessory miracles, one for beatification, one for canonization. And
let's talk a little bit about that. How's the hunt for miracles going? I know in order for him to be elevated, as you mentioned, from venerable to blessed and then blessed to saint, he needs 2 miracles. And so the search is on. And I know there have been many cases of intercessions that have been attributed to him. How's the search for miracles going at this point?
Well, we're working for it. We have a file of people that have sent in miracles of testimony that we just have to find the right one to put in front of the congregation. As you know, there's a board of medical doctors in Rome that will review those cases, and then eventually, if they pass it on, it goes to the board of bishops and theologians. Right now, we are in the process of looking at that file and hopefully finding something that we can take to Rome and get that process moving. But that's our hope and prayer right now, is especially as we're in the middle of the centennial celebration, to get that back in front of them. There was a pause because of COVID and travel, but now that the borders are open, obviously, and we have the ability, we do want to get over in front of our postulator in Rome and the cause of the saints to see what we can do to really move this forward.
Wonderful. We've been talking today with 2 people from the canonization cause of Father Nelson Baker, and of course, Our Lady of Victory there in the Buffalo area, one of the most incredible shrines and basilicas you'll ever see. We were so grateful to be able to film there. We've been talking today with Father David LiPuma, And we will be we're joined also by David Kersten, the Chief Executive Officer of OLV Charities. David Kersten, I'll turn to you now. I think that that basilica that I mentioned is absolutely amazing, but I'm quite sure that throughout the years, this basilica requires some work to keep it up, to restore it, to make it so beautiful for visitors for now and in the future to enjoy it and to make use of it. Talk a little bit about some of the efforts that are being done with this basilica.
Sure, Michael. Well, like so many grand and beautiful houses of worship all across the globe, they're often sometimes seen as a never-ending construction site. But our beautiful basilica here was built back started in 1921, completed in 1926. So in a very short period of time, Father Baker was able to complete this incredible monument to his patroness, Our Lady of Victory. So just in a short 5 years, it was built. As we know, in Europe, there were beautiful buildings that took literally hundreds of years. But here in Western New York, sometimes our weather is not that favorable, so the conditions of Western New York have certainly taken a bit of a toll on our building. It's been cared for very carefully, but this 100-year milestone has provided us with an opportunity to kind of dedicate the energies and the talent and the skills of contractors and architects to really step back and say, what do we need to do to make sure that this beautiful house of worship is available for the next 100 years? So we've had a team of people working very hard over the last 3 years plus, doing a complete assessment of this beautiful building, making sure that it's going to be secure from roof to masonry to drainage, and then working our way in and making sure that we're tidying up and upgrading a number of features interiorly, including our pews and our marble floors, our lighting, those things that we've been concentrating on. We've had a number of really heartening affirmations from the community in terms of fundraising that's connected with us. We were awarded a grant for the National Fund for Sacred Places, which really helped catalyze our fundraising efforts. And now we're about to shift into sort of a new phase with our work, where we're going to try to tackle the dome, which is a very characteristic feature of the basilica. You know, it's a copper dome. In its day, it was the second largest dome in the United States, second only to the Capitol building in Washington. So it's a very important feature of our building, and we're going to need to replace the copper, and that is a very daunting task. So we have a team of people working on that and planning the mobilization of that project, which should last 2+ years to complete.
Wonderful. What a huge effort. And again, I've been there, I've filmed there, and it is truly one of the most beautiful shrines and basilicas in the entire United States. So any work that's being done to keep that going is, of course, a worthy cause. And we've been talking today with Father David LiPuma and also David Kersten, the Chief Executive Officer of OLV Charities. And I think worth mentioning as well is that the legacy of Father Baker continues on in a big way through the many initiatives of Our Lady of Victory's OLV Charities that goes on even to this day. And I think one of the new and exciting things that I've been made aware of is that there's a new Catholic parenting initiative. There was some $1.25 million grant that was received from the Lilly Endowment, and that's leading towards this Catholic parenting initiative. Can either of you talk a little bit about what is being planned for? What is this all about with this nice grant that's been received?
Well, yeah, this was really an exciting opportunity that we were made aware of. For those that in your audience that might not be familiar, the Lilly Endowment is a very significant funding entity in the United States, and they're very generous and supportive when it comes to religious efforts. Now, this is all across the board, a variety of Christian denominations. So in the past year, they launched a request for proposal grant program called the Christian Parenting Initiative for all denominations. And each entity across the United States, about 103 of them were awarded this grant of $1.25 million. So it's literally a $100+ million, $150 million program. We were one of 6 organizations in New York State, the only Catholic entity to do that. And we felt that this was something that was important for us to consider and pursue, taking a cue from our founder, Father Baker, who was always kind of looking within the community to say, how can I respond to the needs that exist around us? And this particular grant initiative is built on a lot of research and data. We know that, unfortunately, across the United States, we're becoming a less religious nation, and there is a significant amount of de-churching that is happening generationally, and it's particularly acute with certain generations, like the Gen Z folks. And the data and the studies are showing that, one of the things that we need to kind of step back and reinforce is the nexus between the role of parents and their children and their faith communities in successfully handing on the faith. This whole grant program is really built on that. And so the Lilly Endowment awarded our proposal, and so what we're going to do is over the next 5 years is develop a program, engage about 35 parishes here in the Diocese of Buffalo, intently and working with parents and the pastoral teams and the children to develop something that is responsive and recognizes this core dynamic where we are supporting and in strengthening and encouraging parents and equipping them with the tools that they need to be very confident in their role as the central teachers for their children. And so that's really what this whole program is built on. We're hoping that as it advances over the next 5 years, we'll be able to establish something that will take root and begin to serve the wider diocesan community here in Western New York.
Wonderful. Well, for people who want to find out more about the Catholic Parenting Initiative or any of the work that's being done with OLV Charities or at the Basilica, what are the best websites or other places for people to connect to?
Well, certainly go to our website where we have identified this particular program. That's certainly a source that you can visit, olvcharities.org. Or you can probably visit the Lilly Endowment. They're in Indiana, and this would probably explain the broader grant initiative that is taking place all across the country.
Wonderful. Well, we're so grateful to you, David Kersten, and also Father David LiPuma from Our Lady of Victory National Shrine and Basilica and OLV Charities. Thank you so much for joining us on today's program and for talking to us about the incredible life and impact of Venerable Nelson Baker. We're always praying for his canonization cause, and we're praying for your great work going forward with OLV Charities and the Shrine itself. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
Thank you, Michael. And you're always welcome here at OLV.
Thank you, Michael.
God bless. And that was Father David LiPuma talking to us. He's the rector of the Our Lady of Victory National Shrine and Basilica, and David Kersten, the Chief Executive Officer from OLV Charities. Great guys, both of them. I've met them both, and they were instrumental in the production of that episode of They Might Be Saints, which you can check out at EWTN Religious Catalog to find out more about the life of Venerable Nelson Baker. And that's all the time we have for today's show. If you missed any of this episode or want to catch up on past episodes, you can go to EWTN.com/radio. Check out the audio archives or download the free EWTN app. I'd like to thank our guests today, Catherine Odell, author of Those Who Saw Mary, and Monsignor David LiPuma and David Kersten talking to us about Venerable Nelson Baker. Check out my show, Explore with the Miracle Hunter, the Tre Fontana episode, where I'll be investigating a miraculous encounter at the site where St. Paul was martyred, the Virgin of Revelation's appearance to Bruno Carnacciola, a rabid anti-Catholic, changed both the man and the church itself. And I'd like to thank you for joining me today on Miracle Hunter, where from claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt. Talk to you next week.